Hello everyone. In this session, we'll be talking about another important concept in programming, which is function. So, the job of function is to make sure that we don't have to keep writing redundant code. Okay, so if there is, a block of code that you feel like you will have to keep using again and again in the problem, in the while writing the program, wouldn't it be convenient if you can write it once and then just call a function for you to write it again and again? So that's what the job of function is. Okay, so the syntax of function is def, which is short for define, and you can write the function name. So let's say I want to write a function on greeting the user. So functions take a parameter within rounded bracket. Okay, so let's say I want the name of a person. Okay, so you have to close this with semicolon. So what I'm going to do is print hello plus the name. Okay, now if I run this code, nothing is going to happen. The reason is because I have not called my function. I've only defined it somewhere in my program. So to call it, I have to go and call my function. So I'm going to call greet, which shows up when I am typing, which means that I've already defined this greet somewhere. So I'm going to say greet Harry. So now when I run this, it's going to say hello Harry. Pretty cool, right? So I don't have to redundantly keep typing whatever I've written inside this function. I just have to type it once, and 100 lines later, if I just have to write a code for whatever I've written inside this block, I can just call this function. So that's the use case of function, guys. It helps you save time by being efficient in writing code. So you can take multiple parameters. So parameter is basically what you're feeding to the function. Okay, here it's the name. Okay, in other languages you would have to specify what type of parameter you're taking. So you would have to specify that's a string, but Python is smart enough to figure that out on its own. Okay, so now let me write another function. So you can write any number of functions you want. So let's deal with some math operation. So I want to write a function that's going to add two numbers that I give it. So let's say these two numbers are a comma b, and I want to just say print this a and b. Okay, so now I can just call my function. So I'm going to say add 7 comma 5. Okay, okay, so now this should give me an answer 12 as expected. Now we'll talk about a keyword called return. Okay, so instead of printing the answer here, let's see what happens if I return a plus b. So this works the same way, but the difference is I won't be printing whatever this value is. I'll be returning it, so I'm not going to print anything for now. Okay, so to fix that, I can go here and say print whatever the value for this function was. So this will again give me 12. Now the use case for return is, why are we using return basically? Return is a safe way of terminating from your function. Okay, for returning from your function. So as soon as the function sees that it has to return this, or even if it just sees a return statement, it's going to come out of this function. Whatever I write after return is irrelevant. So whatever I've written here just below the function, just below the return keyword, will not be printed. So this will not be printed. Okay, yeah, so as you can see, the program just returned a plus b, and it never got to go to this part of the function. So that's how functions work, guys. Now let's write some more complex functions. Okay, one more thing before we go there. What if instead of giving two parameters here, which is the required number of parameters to add two numbers, I can't just add one number. So if I just feed my function just a 7, I'm gonna get an error, right? So the error is saying I'm missing one argument b, right? I can't just do anything with one element. I need two elements to add, right? So in order to not get the error, I'm going to give default values for a and b. So I'm going to give a default value for a and b, saying if the user has not given you the value, just assume that a and b is 0. So in this case, it's going to assume that a value is 7 and b value is 0. So if I run this program, I'm going to get 7 since b is assumed to be 0. So I can even, not pass any parameter. And now my answer will be 0 because a and b default is 0. Okay. So now let's, write another a little more complex function. So I'm going to define a function is odd, which will be taking a number and it will return me true if the number is odd, else it will return me false. So I'll say if n um, divisible when divided by 2 is not equal to 0. So uh, when you're comparing 2 equal to means comparison and exclamatory equal to means not equal to. Okay, so if n is not divisible by 0, then return true. Okay, else I'm going to say return false. Okay, okay, so let's see what happens if I run this code. So I'm going to see if, let's say 5 is odd or not. Okay, so it says true, right? Because obviously 5 is odd. So if I test 4, it's going to print false. So pretty self-explanatory, right? So this is how functions work, guys. So I hope this was a clear, concise way of learning functions. So just take a note of all these syntax. This is pretty important. And you need to think about the parameters you're taking in, return statements. These were all the important topics to do with function. So I hope you enjoyed watching this video and I hope you learned uh, effectively. So thank you for watching.